Hi, it's your $2 Tuesday movie critic here today, and I am back. I know it's been a while, about maybe 4 months, but I am back with On The Reviews. But before I can start my new reviews, I need to go over some of the movies that I did get to watch, but I never got to review because things just got hectic in my life, and we don't need to get into that. But I would be remiss if I didn't at least let you know how I felt about some of the movies that I saw this year that I didn't get to review, but I still just want to share a little tidbit of what I saw, what I thought of the movies. I actually got to see quite a few, and these are just some of them. The first one I got to see starting back in January was Selma. I know it came out in December, but I saw it in January, and this was starring David Oyelowo and Carmen Ejogo. And I'm sure I really butchered their names, and I apologize, but the movie itself was excellent. And of course, we know the great Oprah Winfrey was in there too. And I don't know, every time I see Oprah in a movie, she seems to get better and better each time. But I'm sorry, nothing can top her as Sophia in The Color Purple. That is an iconic role, and I don't think she'll ever have another role like that. But she did her thing in this movie too, along with the rest of the cast. This was such a beautiful movie, and it takes you back in history. And a lot of people think this is another movie about Martin Luther King Jr. Yes, he is in this movie, and yes, a lot of focus is put on him in this movie, but it's mainly put on the fact that how he's affected, how these people of Selma and people that come and join them are affected by this civil rights act that they are trying to get passed. The simple right of voting. And, you know, we, because I include myself in this, sometimes take this right for granted because it was never an issue that I had this right. But there are a lot of people that remember the struggle from back then, and also some of the people that were a part of it, or they have family members. This is just a beautifully done movie. I enjoyed it so much. I cried, I smiled, I laughed, and I felt so inspired by it because it was just one of those movies where you go through a flood of emotions if you're an emotional person. And I'm not an emotional person with all movies, but this was almost like a docudrama, you know. So, and they say, you know, there was some controversy from the movie saying that they took liberties with some of the facts. And I honestly do not know, so I can't say for sure if I saw anything in there that seemed like it was quite fictionalized. I just know that it was a beautiful movie. I recommend it to anyone that hasn't seen it. It's on DVD and Blu-ray now, and I'm sure it's on the cable channels and all that, and you can rent it if you want to. It's a beautifully done movie. You would not regret seeing it, and you may learn something new. Like I learned quite a few new things that I thought I knew, but I didn't. And there's something to learn from this movie. Is nothing else. It is beautifully done. So the other movie that I saw was Night at the Museum, and this was number 3, Secret of the Tomb. Now, I am a huge fan, and I'm sure if you saw some of my previous reviews, you know that I'm a huge fan of not only the Night at the Museum movies, but also Ben Stiller. I think his stuff is hilarious. So I couldn't wait for this movie to come out because I really want to see it. I had already seen the other 2, and I have them on DVDs rather. So I was really waiting for this one to come out, and I saw it at the movies. I love Ben Stiller in this movie. I love the entire cast. It was so great. I loved adding Rebel Wilson to this movie, and I will be very hopeful to see if there is a Night at the Museum 4 that stars Rebel Wilson instead of Ben Stiller. They did a lot of hinting at that, so I don't know if that would actually happen because she is so hilarious. This is a very, very funny girl, and, you know, so I would really love to see her in another Night at the Museum installment in her character that she played in number 3. So excellent. So, again, another movie that I would recommend you go see, or It's, of course, not in movies anymore, but definitely buy it if you haven't bought it. If you liked 1 and 2, you're going to love 3, because it kind of like brings stuff around, and it's full circle, and it's such a touching scene when, you know, the Ben Stiller's character is saying goodbye to these characters that he has basically called friends now, or is calling friends now, because that's who he met when he first started the job, and now, you know, he has to move on. And oh my gosh, just beautifully. And of course, Robin Williams being in there. I'm not sure if this is the last movie that he did, but this is the last movie I ever saw him in, and oh, so beautiful, so touching, especially him saying farewell as the president in this movie, but you knowing that it's also a farewell to Robin Williams, the man. And again, he does an excellent job as Teddy Roosevelt. Just a beautifully done movie. I would have liked to seen more female dominant roles in there. I mean, they could have done a bit more with Pocahontas, I think. You know, and besides me with Teddy on the horse and follow him wherever he goes, I think they could have done more with that. But other than that, I love the movie. I loved Rebel Wilson's part in there, and I like how Ben Stiller was not only the, you know, the guard, he was also the caveman again. That was so funny. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how they did that. I know it was the work of the camera, but it was so funny. So yeah, definitely a huge recommendation for that movie. Okay, my other movie that I went to see, The Boy Next Door. It stars Jennifer Lopez and John Colbert, and I hope I'm saying that right. This movie was not that great, honestly, and it wasn't because it was bad acting. The acting was great. It was just a very cliche storyline. I mean, and it was very predictable. And I do not like movies where I can predict exactly what is about to happen next, or pretty much the ending of the movie. Because I was like, okay, I know this is about to happen next. And I don't know exactly what was going to happen, but I knew where they were going with it. Okay, so this is about, yeah, that, and that's about to happen next. Oh, and she's about to die. Oh, and he's about to get beat up. Or something like that. It was just so predictable. So it's not one of those movies that I would buy again, just because. Now the scene, and I'm sure that's the scene everybody talks about, the sex scene, and it was very hot, very, very steamy. It wasn't raunchy, it wasn't, you know, too much of anything. It was just enough of everything. But I felt bad about watching it, because I know this is a teenage boy, you know, even though in real life he's not, but still. So it just made me feel weird about, you know, thinking this is steamy. So yeah, it was not. Personally, I would not buy it again. I wouldn't recommend it, because you already know what's going to happen. Now, if you like those types of movies, you know, or if you're a fan of J-Lo's, then hey, yeah, go out and get it. Or if you just want another sexy scene to watch from a movie, go right ahead, because you will not be disappointed with that. But there's only one of those. And then it goes back to the predictability of the movie. And so yeah, I didn't like that too much. So this is not one of those movies that I would watch again. I won't watch it again. But so that's my recommendation for that. And it's very predictable. Alright, the next movie that I went to see was 50 Shades of Grey. Now, I want to give my full disclosure here, because I want people to know this. I did read the book. Some people actually most people that went to see the movie, they read the books. I remember seeing a lot of people talking about the reviewing of it and stuff, and how it was so romantic and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know what movie they were watching or what they consider romance, but there was nothing romantic about this movie at all to me. And actually, the chemistry between the two main characters, just Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan, were like there was no chemistry. There was really no chemistry. This movie it had a couple of other names in there, but for the most part, it was about these two characters, Christian Grey and Anastasia. And seriously, there was no chemistry at all between these characters. There was more chemistry in the book than there was in the movie, for me. And I didn't like the book either. So when I went to watch the movie, I was actually hoping it was going to be like a Forrest Gump sort of thing. And you would only know what I mean if you read the book. Pretty much the gist of it is, the book Forrest Gump is totally, almost completely different from the movie Forrest Gump. I think the only thing that Forrest Gump and the movie have in common are some of the characters. The names of the characters are similar. But other than that, and not all of them, most of them are not even in the book. So, I don't know. They did a great job with the movie because it wasn't like the book. But, and I think the person in it, I did see, are in the, entertainment news, just like I'm sure pretty much everyone else, that there was controversy between the writer and the director of the movie. And I could kind of maybe see, and I could be wrong, but I could kind of see in the movie where the conflict could have been, where the writer or the director was trying to give Anastasia a bit more assertiveness, because she was less assertive in this movie than she was in the book. It was kind of pathetic. It looked more like this a very charismatic, well-to-do man trying to have a kept woman as this little girl, because that's what she seemed like in the movie. A teenager at best, but mostly a curious little girl that has found a new game to play, which really creeps me out. so yeah, I think I like the movie a little bit better than the book, because the movie tried to force the romance envelope. Even though they did it in there was a lot of, oh, you're changing me, Anastasia, and Anastasia, oh, but I want more. And I don't know how many times they said that in the movie to convince people that he was changing because of her, but she wasn't satisfied with who he was to her or what he was doing with her. I don't know, but I don't care how many times they said it. They kept doing the same things over and over again. And so yeah, the sex scenes were pretty much bordered on the lines of porn, but really softcore porn. Nothing hardcore. Even with the S&M type stuff, it was not too bad. They didn't actually. I think they were rougher in the book with the S&M type stuff than they were in the movie. So I will give it that. They did kind of, and that probably came to the conflict between the writer and director. I'm not sure. Even with the ending, which I won't give it away, but anybody that's read the book knows, and you've seen the movie, they kind of like were a bit nicer, softer, or whatever you want to call it in the movie than they were in the book. I think the ending was a bit rougher. And I only read I couldn't make myself read 2 and 3. So I didn't read 2 and 3, and I'm not going to see the movies either for 2 and 3. I really did not care for this movie. I would not recommend it. If you just want to see some scenes with some softcore porn, I guess, then help yourselves. For the most part, all the movies that I've seen were, you see, Selma and Night at the Museum. Well, let's say Selma. Selma is pretty much PG-13, I think, and this is something good for kids to see with their parents. I wouldn't let the younger see it, 'cause some of the scenes are just so brutal. With Night at the Museum, that was more definitely a whole family affair. And some of the stuff will go over the young kids' heads, but for the most part, with all the action stuff going on, they're going to love it. The Boy Next Door. There is the hot and steamy scene with the boy next door, so to speak. And so, yeah. But other than that, it pretty much does not get too hot. I would not see it with tweens, because of just the content of it altogether. And I mean, there wasn't a lot of cursing. There was like a little bit of, seeing kind of little stuff, but nothing too bad, honestly. The sex scene was the steamiest scene in the whole movie, and so I would say for that, probably teenagers. This would be definitely a movie for teenagers and above. NC-17. I don't remember the rating that it got, but yeah, there wasn't a lot of cursing. There was not a lot of nudity. There wasn't any nudity. There was more like side glances at things, or so to speak. 50 Shades of Grey. This is totally an adult movie. You wouldn't, definitely, even if you had teenagers, I would not want to see this movie with a teenager at all. So yeah, this is our. I think they tried to make it again more than what it was. There was a little cursing. There wasn't much. Most of the rating was based on the sexual content of the movie. There was a lot, and it wasn't, honestly, it wasn't salacious. It was because of the book and what it was about. I think the most salacious thing about it was them trying to make it into romance. Even trying to get to convert this book into a movie and to try to make it into something that it wasn't. For me, it was never romantic. In the book, it wasn't romantic. Honestly, if you're looking at the characters, the only reason that people, or women, I guess, would think Christian Grey was romantic was because he was a guy with a lot of money. If he was, and he looked really, really hot. I mean, this guy looked great in the movie. And Dakota Johnson, she's a pretty girl. So, yeah, these are very attractive people doing this movie. So, yeah, you're inclined to believe more of the romance because of that, I guess. But if this was some poor kid, say, the guy that's playing Jose, and he's doing the same thing, you know, you go, oh, this guy's a stalker. Because pretty much that's what he was in the book. He's not even as bad in the movie as he's in the book. But, again, this is a movie for adults only. Divergent series. This one is the one Insurgent. Now, this stars, of course, Shailene Woodley and Theo James. This movie is, you know, what it is, another installment of Divergent. I saw the first one. I think I liked the first one better than the second one. I, you know, understood the second one. I get it. You know, Treese was feeling upset because, or rather Tris, because everybody got mad at me because I kept saying Treese instead of Tris, because it's Beatrice. Take away the Bea, it's Tris. So Tris was very upset in the second movie, you know, in dealing with the loss and the death and everything that happened to her. You know, how her life got totally upheaved, and she lost pretty much everything except the guy that was once her teacher. And so she's trying to deal with all of that, and she has a lot of anger issues. I think a lot of the stuff that happens in this movie, they were just trying to make time, pretty much, because a lot of stuff that happened, they could have done other things. They could have cut it. Some things didn't need to be there for me. This one, honestly, just was not as good as the first one. They tried. They really tried. And I think the diehard fans would probably love it. I am not a diehard fan of Divergent. I've never read the books. Full disclosure there. So, and of course, I'm not a teenager. So, yeah, maybe that's where the gap comes in. And maybe that's why I didn't like it as much as some, you know, people that are totally opposite from what I described would like it. So for me, if you're like me, where you didn't read the books, you are not a huge Divergent fan, and you are not a teenager, then maybe this movie is not for you. Same thing with Shades of Grey. You know, unless you were a diehard fan of the book and the series and stuff, you know, you're really not going to like this movie unless you just want to see some softcore porn. Then if you want to see, because there is a lot of nudity in, you know, Shades of Grey. Actually, there's just a lot of violence once again in Divergent. So, you know, there you go with that. And it's actually even not as much as it was in the first movie, in my opinion. So, you take that Divergent recommendation with a grain of salt, depending on who you are and what you like. you may or may not like Divergent. Same thing with Shades of Grey. Because those are, you know, the popular books that were made into movies. Okay, Get Hard. This movie starred Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart. Now, this movie is kind of disappointed me. And when I say that, I mean because I have been, since I've been watching movies starring Kevin Hart, I've been looking for, you know, the same thing. Hilarious, you know, crazy stuff, a bit of physical comedy every now and then, and the contrast between Kevin Hart's characters and the people he's, you know, having these different interactions with. Because that's usually what it is. Kevin Hart and how he's different, pretty different from pretty much the people that he's either buddies with, friends with, that he's hired by, like in The Wedding Ringer. But in this movie, it's the same thing. There is supposed to be a difference, but it's mainly a forced difference because Will Ferrell's character is hiring Kevin Hart's character because he thinks he's been in jail. And he wants to get prepared for it because that's where he's going to be going in 30 days. The movie itself, I did not like, but it's because I like a certain kind of comedy. Will Ferrell is the king of raunchy type comedies, and he hasn't always been, but his last several movies have been quite raunchy. And if you like that raunchy type, you know, stuff, then you're gonna love this movie because it's chock full of it. For me, I don't. It was just a lot of salacious profanity, ridiculous, you know, sophomoric humor, raunchiness. Some stuff was just so, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm watching this. Because I'm not a big fan of Will Ferrell. And I know some people are, you don't like Will Ferrell. And it's not that I don't like him, I just don't really care for all of his movies that came after Anchorman. And I don't know, I never saw Anchorman 2, so I can't say for sure with that one. But that was after I had kind of like given up on Will Ferrell and me liking his movies. But before those, the movies that came before that, with the exception of Elf, because I did not like Elf either, I liked. If you're a Kevin Hart fan, I don't think you're going to like this movie, because Kevin Hart goes to the side, or the raunchy comedy side of Will Ferrell. And if you've seen Kevin Hart's movies before, his movies are not very raunchy. His movies are more of the physical, of the intelligent type humor, if you will. And I like them for that. Yeah, there's a still profanity in Kevin Hart's movies, no doubt. But, you know, I think that I liked his movies a lot better than I like this one. So if you're a big fan of Kevin Hart, you might not like this movie just because it's not what you're used to with Kevin Hart movies. But if you are a big fan of Will Ferrell, then you will love this movie because it is what you're used to seeing with Will Ferrell in the raunchy type comedies. It goes big time. I mean, he goes all out. And, you know, I actually like the previews better than I like the movie. While We're Young. Now, this stars Ben Stiller and Naomi Watts. And, again, I always tell you, I love Ben Stiller and I love Naomi Watts. I love Naomi Watts since seeing her in King Kong all those years ago. And the latest version of King Kong. But I do not like this movie. I don't know if that makes sense. And the reason I don't like this movie, again, that had nothing to do with the acting. The acting was great. The characters were very believable. There was a lot of chemistry going on. I was disappointed because this is a Ben Stiller movie. When I see a movie starring Ben Stiller, unless I see somewhere where it says drama, I'm thinking I'm going to be laughing my head off. That's just it. And it was not that movie. There were a few ha-ha-ha moments, yeah. And I smiled quite a bit. But there was no laughing my head off, like in Night at the Museum. And yes, these are two total different movies. This is not a family movie. There's a lot of profanity in this movie. I don't remember any nudity, but definitely lots of profanity. And it gets a bit salacious at times, but most of the times it's just like people just like saying F you that, and, you know, and just saying a lot of curse words. But it's like it's part of their conversation. It's part of their vocabulary. So I could say it's salacious, but then because of the characters they're playing, especially the two younger characters, that are opposites, Ben Stiller and Naomi Watts' character, Amanda Seyfried and the guy. I know that sounds terrible, but I don't remember his name. But yeah, the movie itself, because of them and part of their vocabulary, I won't say that it's salacious in this movie. But it was just a ridiculous movie, and it did get cliche at some points, and then the points where it wasn't cliche, or you were like, okay, I didn't see that coming. It was no big whoop. It was like, oh my god, I felt like I wasted my time coming to see a comedy, and it was more like I guess you could call it a feel-good movie without being inspiring, because it wasn't inspiring either. So you got a feel-good movie. I mean, yeah, it was good acting. If you want to see, Ben Stiller, Naomi Watts, Amanda Seyfried, and the other guy in something funny and, something new, then go and see it. But if you're going there thinking it's going to be something to laugh your head off, it is not. I never saw the previews for this movies. I actually only just saw it, and I saw Ben Stiller was there. I was like, okay, comedy, woo, about to laugh my head off. And that's why I went to go see it. But yeah, no, there would be no laughing your head off on this movie. But it is funny, and it does take a look at people in their 40s and, their lives and stuff. It kind of took me back to the movie starring Paul Rudd, while This Is 40. It kind of took me back to that, even though that movie was funnier than While We're Young is, and I didn't really think This Is 40 was that funny either. So there you go. Next movie, The Avengers: Age of Ultron. Now this stars Mark Ruffalo, Scarlett Johansson, Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, and Jeremy Renner. And I have to say, I really loved Jeremy Renner in this movie, because he was the most grounded character in this whole movie. Everybody else was just flying, doing crazy stuff, was, 1 minute doing one thing and thinking the next, and then another minute thinking another thing, doing something else. Ugh, it was just irritating. But that's not to say I did not love the movie, because I did. I know, confusing, right? But I love this movie because it was like a joint venture. Everybody was in it and working as a team, even though it didn't start off that way, and kind of there's conflict that ensues somewhere in the middle, and then they add a few new characters that you think one thing, and then there's another. Oh my gosh. And then the character of Ultron. My gosh, this is the greatest bad guy ever, in my opinion. He kind of reminds me of the Cyclops in the cartoons, in the animated series of the X-Men, because he is not a one-dimensional character where he's a bad guy. Urgh, let's kill him. He's not that. He is actually created by the X-Men, or one X-Men, Stark. Okay, let's just put that out there. And he, gets a mind of his own, and he decides that, he wants to still follow in the same line. He just doesn't want to do things the way that the X-Men do them. And he feels that the Earth would be best without the X-Men, and then he gets a whole lot of other crazy ideas about mankind as a whole. So, yeah. But this is his intentions. When you listen to some of the stuff he says, his intentions for the most part are really good, but he just goes about things all wrong. And that's kind of like the creator imitating, or rather the created imitating the creator, because that's what that was Stark's whole thing in the movie. He was trying to create Ultron, and his intentions were very good. He just really botched the pooch on it. And I love the whole team effort. And I also like the conflict going on within the Hulk and Bruce Banner's character, because he, you know, has this conflict where he's still trying to figure out who he is, how he can control it, how he can keep from hurting others, and he gets some of his answers that he doesn't want in this movie. And then he decides to, even though he doesn't get all the answers that he wants, he decides to make his own decisions, and it's not necessarily, you know, what the team wants and needs, but he has to do what's best for him and who he feels is humankind. I think that's kind of like the theme of this movie. Everybody individually and as a team is trying to do the best, has the best intentions, but it kind of goes haywire pretty much on everybody's part except the Jeremy Renner's character. He is the most stable force in this whole movie. And if it weren't for him, I think that this movie would have, these people would have totally destroyed themselves and everyone else along with them. So he played a huge part in this movie, and I really enjoyed seeing him do that. Everybody else, yeah. I enjoyed them too, don't get me wrong. Again, I love this movie. If you love the X-Men, if you like the other X-Men movies, you're gonna love this one too. No, I'm sorry, I keep saying the X-Men and I mean the Avengers, so please excuse me. So, if you like the other Avengers movies, you're gonna like this one. Some people, I did hear that some people thought it was too long, especially the scene with the Hulk fighting Robert Downey Jr.'s character. And I always forget his name because he's my least favorite Avenger. Really, he is. But when they're doing the whole fight scene, some people said that was a bit too much. I didn't think it was too much because that ultimately leads to the Hulk, or Dr. Banner, deciding what he's going to do with his life. And that's what actually helps him to kind of like resolve his conflict, or get some of his questions answered. Not that he likes the answers, but at least he now is able to figure out what he wants to do. And so if you look at it from that point of view, then you like it. And I love the chemistry between the characters, and you know how that all worked together. And even, you know, Ultron, I love the character of Ultron. And it could be because I'm a big Spader fan too. Spader, I'm a big fan, and he was great in this movie, even though all you hear is his voice, but still, well. So these are my movie reviews that I've seen since January up to the present day. I will be reviewing new movies starting next week, and I hope you will join me in that. And I hope you enjoyed this review. Hope it wasn't too long. I mean, yeah, that was quite a few movies, but I hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you next time. Oh yes, by the way, the Avenger movies, a huge kid-friendly movie. If you took your kids to see the other Avengers movies, you're gonna love this one. Yes, just a great Avengers movie altogether. Alright, so again, I hope you enjoy your day. I will see you next time.